What's going on, guys? Running it back with the last four replays from our new player tournament on Saturday. These are the ones that I haven't been able to get all the way through either Saturday or during Monday. We had a ton of replays that people sent in, so I've been just blasting these out for hours and hours, but it's always a good time, and I love being able to help newer people to get around the learning curve that multiplayer represents, because it is an insanely dense multiplayer experience, and it's pretty foreboding. So anything to make that a little bit less intimidating for people, just so that people can really learn and enjoy the multiplayer experience that's on offer here. Because honestly, it took me a long time to really understand the hype. I watched Turin and some of the other like multiplayer people back in like the Warhammer 2 days, and it never really clicked with me. But especially with Domination Mode, which has like a little bit more traditional RTS strategery, just with the summon points alone, banking up supplies and fighting over objectives, it really has opened the game up in just a really fun, exciting way that has a lot of room. Not only for like very solved and like known quantity type builds, but also for a lot of experimentation. And new players, I find, do a lot of really fun experimenting, and there's definitely a lot of things that are like new and exciting, and can definitely work even at higher levels that people bring in here. And just want to give people the pointers that they need to maybe make a lot of these builds work that they're playing around with as they're starting out. So we got Veil of Shadows and Black Whirlwind here for the Skaven on their Eshin Sorcerer. They've got Snickich. Snickich is honestly a pretty incredible lord for the Skaven. Typically, you see Ikit Claw, and that's about it for the Skaven, just because he's got such a strong spell kit. But I think if Ikit's magic gets nerfed a little bit, Flensing Ruin especially, I wouldn't be too terribly surprised to see Snickich pop up a little more often, because he's incredibly tricky to play around. His concealment bombs mean that he can move pretty much anywhere on the field with impunity, pop out of ambush. He's got some strong items and abilities. Deathmaster's Sigil is a great snare. It doesn't last too terribly long, but it actually does a little bit of damage, as well as just give him an opportunity to move in. And with the fact that he actually has scaling damage, he can really snipe characters quite capably. He's got a really good debuff with Cloak of Shadows, which lowers the melee defense by 10 in a 35-meter radius, as well as a little bit of leadership being debuffed there. Another really good use for him, just as a debuff lord. And then Whirl of Weeping Blades is amazing at killing units that are blobbed up around him. He is very hard to lock down with like a minimum of risk. He punishes bad positioning really, really well. And he gets a little bit of his Whirling Blade action in here on Tyrion, who is going to be trying to hang in here and fight this, badass rat, Evil Master Splinter. The Mutant Rat Ogre coming in, actually, and Tyrion immediately getting routed, taking a ton of damage. His Heart of Avalorn does save him that 25% heal. Seems like it double procced there, actually, because he got a ton of extra health there. But he is routing, and Snickich is coming after him, but that's a really good final transmutation. It was an overcast, so Snickich not going down quite as hard as he otherwise could have, and he is going to be popping the concealment bombs. And moving out of combat, that makes him stalked immediately, and it imbues Unspottable, so very difficult to actually know where he's going right now. Slippery buffs his speed up as well. Honestly, maybe worth bringing on a regular basis just for that. 68 speed on Snickich is pretty crazy. I mean, look how fast he's just motoring around the battlefield. Weaving in and out here. Gutter Runners with the Ninja Stars moving up onto the #1 objective with some Skaven Slaves, just to take this point. And Silver Helms en masse with lots of archers and spearmen, gonna be the High Elf battle line here. These Rangers sitting in the woods, you gotta be careful leaving units unengaged. even if your intention is to try and use them to ambush opponents, I would say, I mean, the Rangers can get up at the edge of the forest here. That way they can, they don't have to cover as much ground when they actually want to engage. And typically you want your forces to be, like, fairly well consolidated in domination mode. You gotta be very careful, especially against factions like Skaven, who can have lots of stalked units, as well as some fairly effective counter shooting. You don't want to end up in positions where you're, like, way out of whack with your formation, and, like, missiles way far forward, kind of like what's going on here, can be very dangerous. Luckily, the Skaven don't have a lot of weapon teams. They don't have any gutter runners to jump on these guys, or Doomflayers are probably the worst thing that the High Elves can run into. Heavily armored chariots can really wreck High Elf units just because they do a lot of damage. Low HP on Elf infantry and cavalry and whatnot means that chariots and other high DPS units can typically clear out a lot of models very quickly. And that can be a lot to have to try and grind back from. Definitely a big mistake here. This is something that you don't want to do as a general rule of thumb, is try to dive solo with cavalry. Like, you can see what's going on here with the gutter runners piling in behind, kind of cutting off the retreat of the Silverhelms. They're going to have to, like, peel out across the battlefield. And not moving directly away means they have a much longer route with the Teethbreakers firing at them all the way through. So they basically have to just commit to this charge at this stage, but they're going down, like, hard as well. Those Natty Bubo's sharpshooters are a large Azale unit, just pounding them. They do get on top of the Teethbreakers. Teethbreakers definitely should just pull back a little bit. This is pretty well positioned for the Skaven, honestly, but you've got to actually use your infantry units to screen out cavalry. The best thing you can do with these weapon teams is, if they're getting compromised and you have your infantry right here beside them, just pull back through the infantry, and the cavalry will just get stuck on the infantry and not actually do any damage to the Teethbreakers. But Silverhelms do go down before they're able to finish these guys off. But archers are getting some good shots in here. Doing a little bit of damage to the Teethbreakers and some of these clan rats. Not too terribly punishing for the Skaven. They are definitely getting away with quite a bit here. Having a really good time just massacring those very expensive High Elf cavalry and chasing them off at the Mutant Rat Ogre. Very smart. 27 Silverhelms with that much HP could come back in and cause a little bit of havoc for the low-armored infantry that the Skaven have access to. Lots of blobbed up units here. Veil of Shadows and Black Whirlwind did go down over here, locking the archers in place. I'm really liking the Veil of Shadows play from Corsair. I think there's actually some serious opportunities with this spell, because it is so disruptive. It locks literally anything in the game into its radius, and it lasts for a really long time. It's very strong. And the Skaven having clear line of sights to punish the units that are caught in that vortex, I think is definitely something that could be used on a more regular basis. It's not as easy to use as Flensing Ruin, which is still why Ikit is probably the better option, but definitely if there's any balance changes in the future, I think it might have some potential here. And the High Elves are getting punished for keeping their units way too closely spaced together. What the High Elves really need to be doing here, they needed these Rangers, as well as the Spearmen, up here, just as a defensive formation in front of the Archers. The Archers have a lot of ground that they've taken here, which is nice. But without the protection of their melee units, you see just like one Skaven Slave getting on top of two Archers who are way too close together, is bunching them up really badly for this Plague Claw Catapult, which is just farming huge amounts of value on the High Elves. And despite having reasonable leadership on even their cheaper units, you know, High Elf units rout just as much as any other faction does when they end up in these really poor positions. And They're just taking a tremendous amount of damage on the way out here. Losing your entire archer line against the Skaven's not really a position that you want to be in. Skaven can struggle against mass archer fire just because their units are pretty lightly armored outside of their very elite units like Storm Vermin. Doomflayers have good armor, and I mean, that's really about it. They don't have a tremendous number of armored tools to be throwing up and taking a bunch of bow fire, so being able to poke them at range can make it very difficult for the Skaven to hang out on objectives. Corsair being very conservative here. This is one thing that I wouldn't really necessarily recommend. Now, they are holding on to the number 3 objective up here, but this is a very vulnerable position for the Skaven. Their very low leadership can definitely be quite punishing for them if they don't have good fire support to back up those low leadership units. Really, Clan Rats and especially Skaven Slaves are just there to soak up attention. And be a roadblock, and then you use your range tools to really punish enemy units that are diving. And it's going really well back here. Corsair is pulled back and given themselves a lot of space to be able to punish these Rangers on the way in. The Rangers not going in with any cavalry support or any fire from bowmen. Definitely going to be way too vulnerable here for this to work out long term. Rat Ogres are here in position to intercept as well. Definitely need to get them moving. And, you know, just absolutely crushing it in there. Mutant Rat Ogre, also a good option. It's got Terror. Again, good leadership on a lot of the High Elf units, but they are not immune to Psychology. So they do Terror out if they get knocked into a really bad position. But over here, there's no weapon teams. Not really a lot of high-quality infantry, too. Like, the Clan Vulcan Tail Slashers are a little bit better in melee combat than your standard fare for the Skaven. Not by much, though. And with War Lions and Spearmen, the High Elves might take this number 3 objective, leaving the Skaven triple capped. And while the tickets are fairly close right now, triple caps are never a position you want to be in. You do not want to lose all 3 points, because that triple tick really catches up on you and puts you in a hole very quickly that's hard to get out of, no matter how well you're value trading. The Skaven do have a substantial value lead, but they really need to start compounding on that by getting a little bit more aggressive here. They've got plenty of weapon teams. They've got plenty of support units in here as well. They've got lots of Clan Rats and some Skaven Slaves that can protect, as well as the Rat Ogres for mass to protect against Cav. And what they should probably look to do is kind of link up with this other side of the formation. That is sort of rallying up here. They are still losing that point. What they should do is just get the Rat Ogres, the weapon teams, all moving this way, and form a new battle line with some Clan Rats up in the trees just to keep the High Elves out of there. Weapon teams can kind of sit back here, where they've got some pretty decent lines of sight, you know, especially up on these elevated positions. And they can really fire down and hold on to the number 2, which is where the rest of the Skaven battle line should start to really contest and try to get that double cap, which is very needed here as the High Elves are racking up those victory tickets and have kind of reconstituted something of a battle line. It's not looking too great for them. They're definitely on the back foot here. At least in terms of the units that they've got available. But crushing this high ground objective, potentially, could get them into a winning position by giving them a lot more opportunity to just push the Skaven back and keep them off of objectives if Corsair is not going to be aggressively pushing these points. Clan Vulcan Tail Slashers going down here. War Lions of Trace doing a pretty good job of killing the chaff. Not the best use for War Lions of Trace in this matchup, I would say. They're a very expensive unit. They typically don't trade that well into just mass chaff, even if it's not stuff like spears. Even like Clan Rats can do pretty good damage to them. Rahagor's Pride are in here. They do cause fear, and these guys have Mighty Roar, which can lower leadership, which could give the High Elves the decisive advantage here. It does look like it's going to. The Clane Rats break. They've got a lot of HP left, too. That's really brutal for the Skaven, because it is going to lose them this point. They are moving up on the number 2 objective. They've got a few units out here on the number 1 being punished by the High Elves. High Elves can definitely punish overextended Skaven when they don't have their weapon team support. Again, that low leadership, the poor combat stats, and just the general squishiness because of a lack of armor does leave the Skaven pretty vulnerable to cavalry charges from like Illyrian Reavers, as well as Silver Helms who can do some good work, the archers pouring in fire, as well as just Rangers being a very solid unit overall for the High Elves, one of the few good chaff clear tools they have. The Skaven falling behind on these tickets now. Number 3 objective is secured. They are capping the number 2 away. The High Elves didn't have a lot here. Just some tattered archers who were holding off of the objective. Weapon teams get up here, doing a very good job of punishing these guys and sending all the archers fleeing. Just not enough protection for these guys at all this game from Pop Flux. But Pop is doing a pretty good job of taking care of some of the Rat Ogres. One is dead over here. Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep did kill a Silver Helm over here. They are rallying. They've got 30 models left. Some more Silver Helms moving in. Everqueen's Court Guard out on the field. Not a unit you see terribly often. Honestly, though, I think they might be... I think regular Sisters of Avalorn would be a little more cost-effective. The ROR doesn't do anything too spectacular. They're just a little bit quicker firing with better combat stats, which is nice. But they're not, those good combat stats don't save them from being shot to death, which is what I'm worried about. All that needs to happen is like one Giselle find a good position to get arcs of fire on these guys and just get absolutely massacred. They're very expensive as well. The magic and fire damage, though, as well as the AP, could be pretty good against the Skaven, just to shoot down any like Storm Vermin Halberds, as well as some of the big monsters. Mutant Rat Ogres, a Brood Horror for the Packmaster, or just the standalone monster variant, or a Hell Pit Abomination if feeling very frisky for the Skaven, but they're pretty rare. Black Whirlwind going down? Oh no, the whatchamacallit. I think that was actually Black Whirlwind. Maybe also with a Shadow's Veil. Really good spell casting from the Skaven so far. The Veil of Shadows got some good work done earlier. That Black Whirlwind crushing the Rangers, doing some good damage, getting around that physical resistance. And the Rattling Guns, dude, just continuing to fire in. They've taken a lot of damage. They don't have a lot of value. This is a pretty fresh team. The Teeth Breakers have been doing a much more solid amount of damage. Really good Veil of Shadows here to save the Teeth Breakers from the pressure that the War Lions are trying to put on them. With some Rattling Gun fire coming in. Doing a little bit of damage to these War Lions. Honestly, not the most accurate volleys. A little disappointing, honestly. Rattling Guns are better at shooting larger targets. They can be a little inaccurate against stuff that's lower to the ground, like infantry, some of the smaller monstrous units, especially these War Lions. Probably the Natty Bubos Sharpshooters would have been a better choice to try and punish that, but it does look like they just got unsummoned. They were back here just a second ago. Got the Play Claw Catapult being unsummoned, Pit Fighters being pushed back a little bit, and the value trading has evened out a lot in favor of the High Elves. They have really done a good job in the late game here using their cavalry to punish the overextended Night Runners, Gutter Runners, and a lot of the Clane Rats and Skaven Slaves. And the Skaven really need to get up on this number 1 objective over here. There's not a lot to hold this point. This is definitely capturable right now. And they also need to do something about the Everqueen's Court Guards here. This is one of the risks of going Skaven as a newer player, is they can be very temperamental as a faction. They're very good at playing from a advantaged position when it comes to value. But if they start to fall behind and the games start to get evened out into the late game, a lot of the times the Skaven fall off pretty hard. Just because they're so reliant on their ranged units for DPS, they don't do a very good job of grinding on objectives with their melee units, and that can put them in a very bad position when they are trying to get back onto the board when they lose their points. Triple cap for the High Elves right now. They're really just racking it up. Tyrion, he got his ass kicked earlier, but he's been hanging in. He doesn't have a lot of value, but he did get a really nice blob here for the Metal Mage to just hardcore punish that final transmutation. Not overcast, again, but not that big of a deal. It's not as efficient, but it's still doing decent damage to the very low HP Deathmaster here. Little damage to the Rat Ogres, and then some good Sisters of Avalorn fire pouring in over the top. Pretty decent focus from them. Not the best targets on the field currently, but just being able to chip down anything right now is going to be helping out the High Elves immensely. Since they've got all the momentum in the world on the ticket front. It is triple cap territory. High Elves just need to hold on to 1 point. They really need these Spearmen to hang out on this #1 objective and do what they can to just keep the Skaven off of the #2 as long as possible. It's going to be pretty difficult. They don't have a lot on the field currently. And Corsair's been a little too cautious with the supplies. It can be a little overwhelming knowing when and where you need to bring stuff out, but when you're this far behind on tickets and it's in the last minute of the game, basically, then you've really just got to bring out units en masse and just swarm the points with whatever you've got available in your reserves. You can't bring them into the next game, after all. It's better to use it and lose it than to just wonder what you could have possibly done looking back on it from a retrospective position. Tyrion does go down. Looks like he gets killed by some gutter runners who come out, finish him off with a couple volleys. But that's not going to be nearly as debilitating for the High Elves as it would be for other factions. I mean, it is a -16 leadership debuff to all of the units on the field right now, but they, like I said, reasonably high leadership means they will be able to hang in pretty well. That martial prowess is also not dependent on their leadership, rather just on them being fairly healthy, you know, higher than 25% of their hit points, and they will be able to scrap very effectively over these points. The Skaven can't really leave the #2. Even though they really need a lot of these units to immediately rush the #1, the strong cap weight just from these 2 units is going to mean that you've got to be able to equal that out, and it's going to take a little while to kill these guys. You do have some Poison Wind Globadiers who can do some reasonable damage to them, but you only got 20 seconds. It actually takes 20 seconds to take the points, and the High Elves are going to be walking away with this game, taking some pretty ruinous casualties early, and it was looking pretty grim at one point, but Corsair was a little bit too cautious, pulling back off of this #1 objective early to try and consolidate around the shooting.
I knew it.
It's not a terrible idea, but especially as the Skaven, whose individual melee units are very bad at pushing uncontested and taking points back from your opponent. I understand wanting to preserve your weapon teams, and you did a very good job of it, but you also ceded a lot of ground. And then when you did send melee units in, you were getting punished really badly by the High Elves just swarming those isolated elements and really putting a beatdown on them. Going in with your main formation and just consolidating on 2 objectives and forcing the High Elves to come to you would have functioned as well as holding in your own backline by your spawn points did for you in terms of the value trading for a lot of the game there. It was just that mid-game and end-game cycle of trying to push up Skaven Slaves and Clan Rats, and them getting jumped by Cavalry and War Lions, that really did you in. Because, again, Skaven, they've got lots of cap weight, but it's not very high quality. And for a faction that's got decent cav and is also pretty strong in melee combat, at least comparatively, it's not going to work out too often for you by playing that particular style. What I would recommend, honestly, did a good job of damaging Tyrion early. He was pretty dysfunctional for most of that game, just because he took so much damage. He contributed a fair amount of value, but definitely didn't pay for himself. At that point, you can just pull Deathmaster Snicketch back, because he did also take some pretty significant damage. Keep him safe and alive in the corner of the map somewhere. Or, I mean, since he's got Stalk, you don't really need to do that. Just in the middle of the field somewhere. Wait for an opportunity where Tyrion is really overextended and try to finish him. But otherwise, just focus on keeping your Lord alive. While you use your missiles to really compound on the value lead that you had developed in the early game. Because once you have to unsummon a lot of the early weapon teams is when you start to fall off, because it takes time for those units to go back into the reinforcement pool and replenish their ammo and HP, so to speak, just to refit to come back out. And that's where the High Elves are able to take that decisive lead. And Snicketch did die in the mid-game, lost a lot of leadership on a lot of your frontline units, and that's when you were trying to retake points after you had gotten triple capped on the high ground, where you didn't have a whole lot of weapon team support. Keeping your formations together is very important for the Skaven. I've talked about it before. It's worth repeating again that the Skaven are a very onion type of formation. You've got layers, you know? You want your opponent to have to peel back into your squishy weapon teams as much as possible and punish them all the way up and through into these weapon teams. Having your formations discombobulated and fighting separate fights individually doesn't work out for you, because if you make one mistake and you don't focus fire a target correctly with your weapon teams, and your weapon team actually gets engaged, it doesn't really matter how tattered that unit is, as long as it sticks in combat and doesn't just run away, it will kill the weapon teams, just because of how squishy these guys are. Another thing, I think you might just have too many weapon teams. You don't really need these rattling guns. Usually one rattling gun is more than enough, and I would recommend the Teeth Breakers, just because they're an ROR, they got better leadership, they fire quicker, they've got magic attacks, as well as concealment bombs, so they can go invisible every 90 seconds. And the standard variant is pretty lackluster. They are very inaccurate, they fire pretty slowly, and they just don't have a lot of impact. Jezzails are better, as well as Poison Wind Globadiers. Those are your standby weapon teams. And you should probably have like a Doomflayer in here, as well as maybe some more Clan Rats. Because you got some in reserve here. Not a lot in the opener either. Some spears, a couple more spears would be nice. Or maybe an Eshin Triad actually would be really strong. Some really hard-hitting anti-large AP. Especially against a faction that has lots of cavalry and SEs and the War Lions. Eshin Triads would be really strong at taking all of those units out. And they're very sneaky. They have concealment bombs as well. They can be uber effective if you get them into a position your opponent's not expecting. And they're also fast. They kind of are a cavalry unit, because they have Eshin Triads and Gutter Runners have 54 movement speed. They can keep up with Deathmaster and support him and keep him alive from Tyrion. Because in a one-on-one, Snicketch can do substantial damage, but he's very low health. And one bad engagement can just get him killed. If he's got an Eshin Triad running around with him, though, the fights are pretty much a guaranteed win for you, because you can't dive on top of Snicketch at that point, because the Eshin Triads are, like I said, very good at putting the DPS in on anything that isn't infantry-sized. And even against infantry, they can hold their own better than your standard Clan Rats, because they've got reasonably good stats and a lot of physical resistance. High Elves actually don't have a lot of magic damage on their roster. Like, the only magic damage units that are in this build from Pop Flux is Tyrion and the Everqueen's Court Guard. That's literally it. Everything else cannot circumvent physical resistance. that Death Runners and Eshin Triads have. So they're pretty reasonable combatants into the High Elves on a pretty regular basis. So, that's the end of this one. It was a very long-winded breakdown here at the end. But, you know, it's worth talking about because I love the Skaven. Thematically, probably... Actually, you know what, I'm going to go so far as to say thematically, my absolute favorite Warhammer faction across both mediums, 40k and fantasy. They're hilarious, they're wonderful, and super cool. They're very beginner unfriendly, though. So I really want to take some extra time just to like try and break them down and lay out winning strategies with them, because they are very good once you become familiar with them, and they're one of the best mid-tier factions. They absolutely dominate most of the other ranged factions in the game, and are pretty reasonable into a lot of the other matchups. They struggle against the Chaos factions especially, but that's not that big of a deal. That's where you bring in some other factions that you become familiarized with to cover up the holes. Being that there's 24 factions in the game, it's really good to lock in and learn one to start off and become experienced and familiar with all of the matchups on them. But then you do need to branch out. That way, if you're getting into some of the other formats that aren't just single faction tournaments, you can actually go in and scrap fairly effectively and have some good counterpick options to cover the weaknesses of your main faction. The High Elves played that very well. Outside of the early dive, which went really poorly, Pop Flux got punished and punched in the mouth, and then reformulated a winning strategy just by taking advantage of the Skaven's lackluster melee units that were available on the field and really punishing that, and getting rid of the overextending infantry on the points and just hanging on to that triple cap. Winning on objectives is all you need to do. Even though the value trading wasn't amazing for them on a lot of their tools, they were able to still get it done. Just keep the archers a little bit safer in the early game. Make sure that your main formation has proper cover for them to screen out enemy units just jumping on them for free. Make sure that you're focus firing, and don't dive your cavalry into the back line without any kind of follow-up support from infantry, because that is almost never going to go well. It's usually better just to get shot, and that sounds like nonsense, but it honestly can be a better situation for you, just because it takes a lot longer for missile units to kill stuff at longer range, where they're a little less accurate than if you're rushing in. And not only are you being shot at with maximum accuracy and efficiency, but also being countercharged by lots of melee units that are grinding out like free value on your own very expensive tools. So those are the things that Pop Flux should keep in mind here. But very well played by both sides. Just you know, a few things to clean up on the decision-making level for both of these players, and it'll be pretty set. Alright, we're back. We've got Kislev, we've got Ogre Kingdoms, we've got a very elite Ogre Kingdom build, in fact. Going up against an SE blob from Suga here. Taking some inspiration from Inticity, I would guess. Or maybe not, maybe just coming to this very similar-ish build all on their own. But Kislev is one of the better factions at playing these very single-entity heavy styles, just because they have very good healing support with their Patriarchs. And Kastalton is a Lord, but he does fit the Patriarch archetype as a Legendary Lord. He's got all of the same abilities. I would recommend not bringing Ursun's Roar. It's pretty speculative as an ability. It's very short duration. Doesn't make it all that useful for buffing leadership. It's really only if you want to get a bunch of extra charge bonus, which is fine, but you're better saving the money, in my opinion. Dash's Song of Winter Sunlight, reducing vigor, basically gives perfect vigor to the Kiss the Fight SEs. I think for this style of build it works. If you're going wider, though, I would cut it. And towards Battle Hymn, also a decent buff, so going very heavy into trying to keep all of these SEs fighting at maximum efficiency. Some Horse Archers to take points early. We've got Gorgers hovering around in the mid-distance for the Ogre Kingdoms. They've got Man-Eaters with Iron Fists, 3 of them, 1 Noblar, a Crusher, an Ogre Paymaster, and a Saber Tusk pack. Ogre Paymasters, unfortunately, are probably the worst lord that the Ogres have access to right now. They don't have magic. Their buffs are solid, but pretty unspectacular. There's just better options. Like, the best option for the Ogre Kingdoms is the Slaughtermasters. They have a passive heal in melee combat. They have debuffs in melee combat as well. Really good Lords of Magic with Deaths, Heavens, Beasts, and Great Maw magic. There's really, and they have a really strong boost to their, not only their power recharge rate, but also their Winds of Magic reserves, which is very rare. They're by far and away your best bet for Ogre Kingdom's Lord choice. If you want a melee Lord, then you should bring Golg, because he's got healing as well. He's a lot more durable. The Ogre Paymaster having no heals makes him very squishy. He's got low armor. Again, the buffs are decent, but not spectacular. He's just not a decisive enough Lord to, like, win you engagements in the style that buff characters traditionally do. Like, the Kiss the Fight army here is going to have much better decisive engagements as a result, because despite Man-Eaters being a reasonably strong unit, there's a lot of anti-large here available for Kislev, and they just have solid heals as well. The Ogre Kingdoms, they have some strong healing spells in the form of Troll Guts, as well as their army ability, Meat Feast. But it's not really AoE healing. So Kislev being in this big blob fight is going to have a much better time, because they will be able to outgrind the Ogres eventually. The Man-Eaters are getting smacked around right now. One of these Man-Eaters is down to less than half HP. The Frostworms and the Incarnate Elemental doing big damage. Incarnate Elemental with the Howl, as well as Incarnate Flock of Doom, also doing a very good job of making it a little more likely that these guys end up routing out of here. And the Ogre Kingdom's shooting is really where they are at their absolute peak in terms of the damage they can do. Lead Belchers wouldn't be good against these SEs, but Man-Eater Pistols would be fairly strong. And typically you just really need some Noblar support for the Ogre Kingdoms. Noblars look like a terrible unit on paper, but arguably they're the most important unit that the Ogre Kingdoms can have out on the field at all times. They're really annoying. They're 200 gold. They get underfoot of your fights, and they are the damage soakers. They're your meat shields, and you need to use your meat shields when you're relying on Monstrous Infantry, because Monstrous Infantry can just get overwhelmed by numbers, and then they can also fall off really hard against big SEs like this. They are beating down a lot of the big monsters here. Salyak's Lullaby needs to be used by Suga here. If you're gonna go with this style of play, then your micro needs to be really on point. Otherwise, wider, more conventional armies are your better bet. We do finally get the Salyak's Lullaby here. We do also get the Ursun's Roar, but again, it just wears off immediately. Man, this Frostworm being isolated on the edge of the objective here, on being surrounded by those Man-Eaters who are actually able to push it back. Big loss for Kislev here. They're also in a bad position with the Horse Archers being attacked by the Saber Tusks here. One of the rallying Man-Eater Iron Fists also gets into combat here, doing some pretty significant damage to these Horse Archers. And as good as these SE blobs can be, as good as your healing is, if you just sit in and grind endlessly against high-quality units, that is one way that you can just get outfought. And while while this isn't the best Ogre Kingdoms build for taking on a single entity blob, typically you just want to be able to shoot these guys down. At least the units here are high quality units with ITP, so the terror isn't impactful. That's really putting Kislev on the back foot here. Noblars are routing. Ever since those Noblars got in there, the Ogre Man-Eaters were actually taking a lot less damage, and they're all fairly healthy. They've done a very good job of paying for themselves. Having a couple more out on the field would be pretty nice. Lead Belchers do get compromised by Kossovite Dervishes here. Sugar had a little bit of an even trade going on, but is now falling behind pretty significantly. And the Ogre Crushers, very good use of these guys. Pulling the Lead Belchers back through the Crushers, who have insane mass, by the way. And the Calcified Dervishes can't quite follow, and the Crushers with their good stats, high weapon strength, beating down a lot of these poor Skirmish Cav. But they are able to rout that Lead Belcher unit. Enough of them have pushed past the Crushers to probably be able to finish these guys off. No, don't rally back. Gotta finish these guys off. They've got 10 models left. This is a big mistake. Yeah, these Lead Belchers don't have a lot of HP, but they've got 10 models left. For shooting units, it's much more important to kill the entities rather than just raw HP damage, because functionally they've got more than half of their damage output available to them. They could just rally in the forest here, move back out, and just get started shooting again, and they're incredibly devastating. So this could be a bad situation for the Ogre Kingdoms, or sorry, for Kislev, if they're not able to finish this Lead Belcher off. But Kislev's got a little bit of a rally coming in. The Frostworms actually just barely able to hang on and finish off the Paymaster here, who did go down to the Frostworm. We've got Kossovite Dervishes. They did manage to finish off this Crusher unit. More Kossovite Dervishes compromised the Lead Belchers. Not enough cover for the Ogre Kingdoms on their expensive shooting pieces. I do think bringing those Lead Belchers out is the right call, but not having enough there to protect them, definitely a big mistake. You don't want to bring them both in at the same time and push them up together because they're very squishy. The best thing you can do, they're 1,000 gold, right? You bring 2 of them out together, that's 2,000 gold. Just bring 1 out, and then spend the 1,000 gold on like a Noblar and then an Ogre Bull or something along those lines. That way you've got units that can protect the Lead Belchers. And then these guys will just absolutely crush Iceguard Glaives, Kossars. The Horse Archers even do reasonably good damage to the Dervishes as they're trying to get into combat. As it stands, having a big value lead early was Mafia Pig, but Suga just sticking with it, man. Not being deterred by the huge amount of damage that a lot of the SEs took. Lost the Incarnate Elemental. One of the Frostworms has gone down. It died over here. The other one is on death's bed, but Kastalton's still alive. He does still have 1 Solyax as well. We do have the magic available also. Death Frost and Ice Maiden's Kiss available. Should be reasonably good at clearing out Noblars, as well as poking down an Ogre Paymaster if he comes back out, which is going to be pretty difficult because Mafia Pig has no supplies left, basically. And has also lost the majority of their army. Bringing a lot of Iron Guts out. They are very high armor. They're going to struggle against the Iceguard Glaives, though. These Glaives are anti-large in melee combat, and they've got pretty respectable melee defense. And with that bonus of 17 versus large targets, they're going to shred through the Iron Guts, despite their heavy armor values. I wouldn't be retreating them. They have charge defense. So if they just... The way you utilize charge defense is just make sure your unit is facing the enemy. And as the enemy charges into you, against, you know, stuff like these Streltsy who don't have the charge defense, they'll be doing, like, max damage. But the Ice Guard actually do damage in return because of the reflection that they've got, and that would be a very bad situation for the Iron Guts. They just get massacred. Ogre Charge is a decent ability, but You know, a reduction of half of their charge bonus means they're not going to be all that impactful. It's respectable, but, you know, it is what it is. Moving out of the way of the Boydnoz brawlers and letting them get a really high value volley off isn't a bad idea either. And you did move these guys onto the flank where they're going to be able to just pincushion the poor Iron Guts from behind. And the Cosspike Dervishes, doesn't matter how tattered a unit is, a rear charge is a rear charge, and you can see the leadership on these guys just breaks immediately. Very nice utilization of a very tattered unit to get a decisive win here. That is a very important tool to utilize in domination games, where oftentimes you're making really hard decisions as to what you are going to have on the field versus not, when and where you're going to unsummon. Being able to use very low HP units to like maximize chaos in your opponent's ranks can get you massive advantages for a very steep discount. And then you can always unsummon after they've done their job of like routing stuff, because these Iron Guts got no value to speak of, really. I mean, one of them only 92, the other was 600. Pretty brutal stuff for the Ogre Kingdoms. They got one Iron Gut on the high ground here. Taking the #1, but it's very Kislev favored on the tickets right now. Not a lot of ways they can get back in this. I'll go and formulate a build that I think would be a little more effective for the Ogre Kingdoms, without drastically changing the intention and design of this build. I do understand and see the theory behind this opener, but I think that the Ogre Paymaster is probably just a really poor way to go about it. Again, he's just not impactful enough. The buffs are bad. He's a mediocre combatant. He doesn't have heals, and he's got low armor. He just gets clowned on by way too many enemy units and way too many different combat lords. And the ogres are a little bit better when they can be a little bit more durable. So we're coming over here. Ignore the double Thunder Tusk. Just bring a Slaughtermaster. And if you want to go for a fat blob fight where you can decisively win an advantage, you bring a Beastcaster. Bring Belly Slapper and extra ingredients. You could do Greedy Fist if you want. Excuse me. It imbues a increased cooldowns on your opponent's units in a radius around your Lord, which is pretty effective. It's a little disruptive, especially against that particular Kislev SE build, but, you know, you're not going to see that too terribly often. But if you want to go for a fat melee blob that can just, like, steamroll your opponents, Curse of Honor here is an AoE debuff for 21 seconds that lowers all of the important stats that your opponent is relying on in melee combat. Lowering speed means they can't escape easily, especially with the Ogre Kingdoms being as quick as they are with all of their, you know, actual, like, Ogre Bulls and Crusher type units. And then you lower melee defense and melee attack, giving you a very decisive edge. So you can force big fights with your speed, and then just debuff everything that your opponent has in a position, and just cause absolute mayhem by steamrolling over them. Ogres can snowball very quickly. They are an incredible faction at both rush styles of play, by bringing the, like, Man-Eaters and even just, like, lots of Ogre Bulls and stuff like that. They're also excellent at long range, where they've got, you know, pretty good shooting. They've got some cheeky artillery stuff, like the Scrap Launcher and the Iron Blaster, but really it's the Lead Belchers at range where they shine the most. These things destroy cavalry and infantry like nobody's business. They're honestly one of the best missile tools in the game. That's typically how people play the Ogre Kingdoms. But if you want to do a rush style with triple Man-Eater Iron Fist, it's very viable. It's very micro-intensive, though. And you do need Noblars. Absolutely have to have Noblars in your builds. They facilitate They facilitate value trading very well, as well as soaking up damage, and just being, like, fairly reliable. Chaff, you know, they're expendable, they don't have great cap weight, but just having 200 gold roadblocks while your other units maneuver around and find, like, high impact opportunities to utilize that 50 charge bonus is really brutal, and can compound a big advantage for you if you're microing your ogre bulls around effectively. You don't want to sit and grind with ogre bulls too much. The man-eaters are better than your standard variants in, like, the dual weapons and the just regular old ogre bulls. But typically, the charge bonus is where the ogre kingdoms find the most advantage and the best bang for their buck, so to speak. So something like this is a good starting point, and then the last 1650 you can mix and match as you please. You just really need these guys out early, because they're pretty slow. So it takes them a while to get up on points. You can always summon your ogres out of reserve, because they get up to the battlefield, they get up to the front line pretty quickly. It's just a general rule of thumb to have your slower stuff in your starting force. That way your quicker units can come up and you can push in conjunction a lot better in one go than trying to do quick units in the start, develop out slow stuff, and push in behind them, and try and lock down objectives after the decisive early engagements, because that's a very high risk strategy. I mean, there is reasonably high floor for it, or a high ceiling, I guess, for potential damage that you can cause to your opponent. But if you fumble the bag and you don't have numbers to back any of that up, all of the value trades you might have gotten early by winning with your mobility will disappear in front of your eyes if your opponent is able to just, like, survive the worst of it, trade evenly, and then push up more durable units onto the field to just ice out your chaff. And, you know, Ogre Kingdoms, they are pretty reliant on their chaffy type of units. What else could you do? In the reinforcement pool, you know, you can get the lead belchers in reserve. You can bring 2 if you really want. Although I would try and honestly start off with 1 in the opener, just because they're so effective. You know, a little bit of a deterrent. It can cover 1 objective off for you and give you time to grind on another objective where your man-eaters can really turn the tide of battle for you in your favor. You know, Saber Tusk packs and Blood Vultures are pretty nice to have in reserve. I didn't see Blood Vultures. I'm not sure if this player has the DLCs. Although it has to because of the Paymaster. So, yeah, Blood Vultures, very strong unit. They get big buffs as long as stuff is dying around them, which is, you know, in domination mode, there's lots of fights going off pretty much at all times. There's always going to be opportunities to get this Carrion Frenzy charged up, and they're just a shredder of a flyer. They're very strong. Definitely can recommend having a couple in your builds as the Ogre Kingdoms. Gorgers are nice. They have Vanguard deployment, and they're, again, very quick as an Ogre unit, so reserve is a better place for them because they're pretty hyper-specialized as an incredibly low armor anti-infantry killing type of unit. They're very vulnerable to chaff spears, and people are going to bring a lot of anti-large against the ogres, so Gorgers need to be used very sparingly and appropriately, or they are just going to value trade incredibly poorly for you, and just lose you a lot of momentum, because they are expensive. At 1,000 gold, they're not something that you can afford to throw into a bad situation and expect them to do anything at all. I don't see a lot of people use Yetis, but, you know, having some Crushers, not a bad idea. Pretty powerful, elite, monstrous cav unit. They flatten everything of that 80 charge bonus. Mornfang Great Weapons, though, are arguably a little more cost-effective. They're a go-to for most Ogre Kingdoms players. Again, though, with good micro, you can use these more elite options and really thrive with them. And the little buckler that the Man-Eaters have is, you know, like a little bit of missile mitigation. Missiles are another way that you can fight against the ogres if you got really good shooting. And you're able to, like, poke down lead belchers early. You can really massacre the low armor Ogre Kingdom's units on the way in. Because outside of Iron Guts and the Golg's Man-Eaters and Crushers, you know, Noblars, Ogre Bulls, Gorgers, Saber-Tusks, Blood Vultures, lots of very low armor units here that you can really push around with cheap missiles. So yeah, it's a little bit of a breakdown for the Ogre Kingdoms there. Just some things to keep in mind. And we're going to be moving on here. We've got our round 4 game between Jaden and Broccoli Girl here. Broccoli Fangirl, no less. I mean, it's a top-tier vegetable, so I gotta respect it, you know. Amazing name. You got a cultist here. You got a basically a hero squad for Nurgle. It's a very reliable strategy for Nurgle. Their heroes and lords are very strong. And Kha'Zix is making a little bit of a comeback. He was pretty underrated when he was released with Thrones of Decay. He had a little bit of a moment in the sun upon release. But with the way that Domination Mode works, the meta shifts a lot, I've noticed. Oftentimes, just because you've got access to, like, a reinforcement pool, people are able to really tailor strategies to shut down, you know, specific types of builds. And Kha'Zix became a little bit, there's always something that can take care of single entities or enemy, like, mass infantry or whatnot. And it's a big, like, push and pull kind of situation for the meta, where one strategy starts to really become popular and then people develop some answers to it. And it swaps around pretty naturally. So the meta doesn't really stabilize and just, like, crystallize. It changes all the time. So Kha'Zix's been coming back is the long and short of what I'm trying to say here. And you know, he's got some pretty powerful abilities. You don't really see any of them here. Just Corrupted Flesh for the ward save, which is pretty effective on him. He does have regeneration. It's pretty hard to wear him out. He's got great stats as well. Very durable, and can definitely bully a lot of different characters, as well as just being good at killing infantry. He actually does a lot of damage in sustained combat against infantry units, just because he's got so much weapon strength. He kills 3 or 4 infantry models with every swing, and he attacks pretty quickly. I've had a couple of games where him just fighting infantry, he got almost 2,000 plus value, and then dueling some characters, he got like another 1,000, so he's got some very high value trade potential. We'll see how he does here. You got the Chaos Lord of Nurgle. We've got Rancid Visitations and Fleshy Abundance. Oh, Curse of the Leper here as well. You know, you can't really go wrong with the Nurgle magic. It's all pretty effective. There's 2, like, schools of thought to it. You either bring Rancid and Fleshy Abundance, and you either try to heal a bunch, or you try to snipe your opponent's lords. It just depends on what the situation is. Or you try to use the lore passive, Children of Nurgle here, which gives a passive heal to your entire army, and what you do there is you spam Stream of Corruption or Miasma Pestilence. Either strategy works, it just depends on the matchup. Against the Greenskins, you can probably do both. We'll see how the more expensive spell kit works out here. Rancid will be very good against the Night Goblin War Boss. And Overcast Rancid Visitations will take him down to less than half health, I think. It is insanely powerful, this spell. It does massive damage. I mean, 66 to 133 per second. The Overcast is the most effective, or efficient form, I should say. Because for double damage, you're paying less than, way less than double the amount of Winds of Magic. Some spells are just period better overcast, and some are better just casting the base form. Typically, more expensive spells are better overcast. They have better like effects at higher tiers for less of an investment for that double duration or like radius that Fleshy Abundance gets. While cheaper spells, if you're spamming the overcast, of course you can miscast and do damage to yourself. You need to be a little more cautious if you're going to be constantly overcasting cheaper spells, so you don't blow your own lords up. Nurgle can get around it, of course, because they have lots of healing. Nurgle Sorcerer has the Crown of Everlasting Conquest, one of the best passive heals in the game. This guy's very, very difficult to snipe. And with the good magic lures and reasonable combat stats, can just be really high impact. And Cultist, Kha'Zix, Plague Toads, and Marauders all just getting up on the front line, taking a very early aggressive fight against the Greenskins here. So just pandemonium kicking off across the battlefield right now. Good micro on the Wolf Rider Archers, taking the #1 objective, using the little bow cav to poke away at the Marauders on the middle point here for Nurgle. And we'll see how it plays out up top here. Typically, the Greenskins win just melee grinds because they've got, you know, very powerful, cheap infantry units with good power spikes in the form of, like, the Wah and some of their magic options. They don't have any of the buff spells here, though. They've got death magic on the Hag, which can be pretty strong. You know, Doom and Darkness can be good for leadership bombing demons, because if they start to crumble, demonic instability just absolutely ruins them. But, you know, Spirit Leech is good for working down characters. It's going to be pretty tough to do that, though, because a lot of these characters are incredibly dangerous. Kha'Zix down to half health. I have no idea what happened to him here. Spirit Leech and that Feral Wyvern that was on the field a minute ago must have done some pretty significant damage to him or something. Night Goblin Warboss, some okay value. Man, he's just getting pummeled right now. Dang, Kha'Zix really struggling. Maybe it's the Black Orcs. I think it might be just a combination of all of these tools here doing big damage to our boy there. But he's alive and well. He will be able to heal himself passively with his regeneration, but he did lose that ward save, which is really unfortunate. Should be able to grind out some reasonable value against the Black Orcs. Oh, but Spite of the Bad Moon being popped here, giving them an anti-large bonus and starting to really chip away at Kha'Zix. Really good tech tools for dealing with these heroes and lords that Nurgle is relying on and getting called out a little bit. Jade doing a very good job of using the spells and just concentrating all the damage here. Fermented Fungi going down to Rampage Kha'Zix again. Locking him down, debuffing his melee defense, making him very vulnerable. And Kha'Zix is on his way out here. He might be dying right now. Lots of casts on the boss's loons. Very well used, doing big damage to some Marauders over here. Doing some reasonable damage to the Frolickers Bubonic, some of the Plague Bearers. Kha'Zix is able to get away. He's barely alive. He is going to be regenerating the entire time he's running away. Whether he rallies or not and is able to come back into the fight and get some decent value is going to be a big make-or-break moment, potentially, for the forces of Nurgle. Big loss here in the center. Very unfortunate. All of the Marauder Horsemen here looks like they just got massively compromised by the Raider Cav, as well as the Archers. Boar Boy's also in here, doing some serious work against these guys. Can't really afford to lose your Throwing Axe Cav as Nurgle. They provide a lot of battlefield control. Since you're a fairly slow faction in a lot of other areas, those guys having 90 speed and reasonable damage output with their AP axes, it's kind of important to keep them around. And they just get absolutely rolled up here. What can you do to mitigate that? Probably, I mean, against the Greenskins, you really gotta expect Boar Boys to come out. Boar Boys are very good with their charge bonus. They fall off really badly if they get locked down in combat, though. What could you bring against them? Probably, I mean, some Rotting Riders are really good because they have Terror. So they can come in and they can do big damage to these Boar Boys and the Biggins, and then also Terror Route them and send them running. I do think the Rotting Riders are one of the best options for Nurgle in terms of controlling mobility engagements with good micro, and as long as you don't let them get totally overwhelmed by numbers, they're a very high impact unit. I haven't seen a lot of spell casting from the Nurgle Sorcerer. He's got a little bit of value. I haven't seen any Rancid Visitations on the Night Goblin War Boss. If your Lord, or if your opponent, I should say, is going for a Lord like this with a lot of abilities with high impact, like Fermented Fungi and the boss's Loons, as well as Spite of the Bad Moon. Tormentor's Sword also, God, it's one of the best toolkits in the game, honestly, on the Night Goblin War Boss, but very squishy on the HP, which is what I'm trying to get to. If your opponent has a very squishy Lord like this, that's got a lot of abilities, I mean, you got the perfect spell here. Rancid Visitations being overcast on this guy, just 2 good pops, and he's dead. And if you can kill him early and delay your frontline engagements, you know, you're mitigating the leadership on the Greenskins quite badly. They will break and run when their Lord gets sniped, and they start taking damage. And you've got a lot of psychological effects popping off with, like, Fear and Terror available, since you got a lot of demonic units, strong, like, SCs that you can bring in. You can really play havoc with the Greenskins' leadership. Trying to play this mobility game is not a good idea. Greenskins have a lot of tools to win those engagements, and being able to bring out lots of cheap infantry. Oftentimes they can frustrate your attempts at, like, grinding out value in the mobility game by dragging you through their infantry, and really put you on the back foot that way. It's much better to try and pick apart the Greenskins where they're vulnerable. Just because they're a Horde faction, or if they do skew to be very elite, there are oftentimes just, like, very clear holes that you can exploit. If they go super narrow and super elite, then you want to bring out your high impact DPS units that can either, like, shock damage down Black Orcs or poke them at range. If you've got, like, you know, the Angels of Decay or something like that, you can really mess those guys up with those type of units. If they go really wide and they bring a very vulnerable Lord to snipe spells, of course, you use Rancid to kill this guy early. And focus in on him very hard. Ignore the Wyvern as much as possible. Wyvern's not really even doing all that much. Killing the Night Goblin War Boss would definitely have given you a much cleaner fight in the front line. You've ground the value back pretty nicely, though. Finally going to be taking this high ground objective. But playing a little more conservatively here on the number 1 and the number 2 with your mobility, there's no reason to overextend into the backline over here. You want to just, like, keep things as even as possible out down here on the low ground, and keep your opponent from just, like, throwing all of their numbers up on here and finishing off your fairly tattered units. I'm not sure what the magic situation is here, but this is, like, a prime opportunity for just, like, a big fleshy abundance. You've got a lot of fairly tattered units on the HP front. A lot of these guys have quite a few models left. Just rallying them up, you know, blobbing them together, overcasting a fleshy abundance on all of these infantry units will make them able to hold this high ground for quite a while still. I mean, Nurgle is very durable. At least in terms of the, like, melee defense and HP pools. They can be pretty frustrating for factions like the Greenskins who lack magic damage because they can't really get through the demons effectively. And then with just bodies with, like, Marauders or Chaos Warriors, you can usually swarm pretty well and take care of business that way just by grinding out the objectives. Overextending Pestigores, just don't do this as a rule. Very bad idea over here. Like, these guys just get swarmed by all of this cheap Raider cav who've honestly gotten some pretty good value. They're pretty inexpensive. They're like 400 gold, I think. They're all well on their way to paying for themselves, and this one's doubled its value just about. Not really something you want to see. Those guys are very squishy. If you leave them to their own devices and give them opportunities to get rear charges, like I said, it doesn't matter how crappy the unit is or how tattered they are, a rear charge is a rear charge. It's going to do the same amount of devastating leadership damage one way or the other. And losing a 675 gold unit to just like a blob of like Boarboy Biggins and then like a horde of Raider Cav. Pretty sad situation. Like, the Greenskins need to chase these guys off because the Pestigores could rally. You know, they haven't taken so much damage that they won't be able to come back into the fight and still get some value back. When you see stuff that's routing, just chase it down with something. Greenskins have lots of cheap, quick mobility that can do so. We've got a Fata Buna on Angels of Decay. Not a very good target at all. Fata Buna is very specifically tailored for large numbers of entities. So, like, cavalry or units. Any unit that has over 25 models. I mean, it says it in the tooltip. Anything with over 25 models, it does full damage to. Angels of Decay only having 12 models. Fata Buna has half damage or even less, depending on how few models it has. Very ineffective targeting there. You're actually going to do more damage by casting Spirit Leech on the Angels of Decay. For a much cheaper cost, too. 22 WOM just going into these guys is a big loss for Jaden on that Winds of Magic front. Nurgle is able to rally up in here. Kasich struggling early, not great, but he did survive. Came back in. I mean, he didn't get a lot of value. Credit to the Greenskins for dealing with him very effectively, but he did soak up a ton of damage. And the Sorcerer Lord and the Cultist, you know, not tremendous value from them, but respectable enough. And they're just annoying single entities to have to try and kill. So they've been able to slow the cap down on this high ground objective for quite a while now. Broccoli Girl getting a value lead here. I don't know about being in a winning position, though. Value leads can be very deceptive. Greenskins have gotten a lot of decisive engagements and killed a lot of routing units. When that happens, the values can be a little bit misleading. It can be very hard to tell when and where what you've killed is actually being reflected properly. And another thing to consider is that, you know, you've got some very expensive units on the field for Nurgle that haven't taken a lot of damage, while their ground forces are in a very beleaguered state. They got a handful of Marauders on this middle point, some Nurglings here. A couple horsemen who are being screened out with another Nurgling. That's, you know, some, like, reasonable amount of cap weight. But they just don't have numbers anywhere in any one concentrated area of the field. And these expensive units are not really carrying the game like they would really need to be able to make up for the fact that they don't have a lot of, like, capture weight on the field. You know, flying units are a risk, no matter how strong they are. Not having cap weight on a unit does leave you pretty vulnerable to just being swarmed on the ground. The Greenskins, very, very good at that. Right, Wolf Rider Archers poking away at the Angels of Decay, a very good target for them. Plague Drones have very low armor. Yeah, the Fizz Res is nice, but, you know, this is a 400 gold cavalry shooting at something that's 1,700 gold. They're going to massively uptrade into those poor Plague Drones. And the Feral Wyvern comes back out to scrap with them again. Just being disruptive against these guys is really nice. And there's not really a ton of great targets for the Angels of Decay either. Angels of Decay are much better at killing single entities than they are at shooting at cavalry and infantry. They do reasonable damage there, but It doesn't fit their profile as well. And honestly, it's really only against super elite infantry and cavalry that they can really uptrade the way that they need to justify their cost. Plague drones, they've done pretty well. They're in combat here against the Savage Orcs, but again, no cap weight over here. No cap weight on the 1 and 2, and the Greenskin Wah, dude, just like throwing infantry out here. The infantry aren't doing amazingly, but even though they're not getting like tremendous amounts of value, just being on the field, stopping up Nurgle's attempts at capping the points, and then even if they value trade fairly inefficiently, they're still getting some value against Nurgle's own cap weight, and again, keeping them on the back foot. Plague drones going down here. Not able to pay for themselves, unfortunately. The Angels of Decay just can't get away from this Wyvern. Honestly, very exciting to see a Wyvern used like this, and actually do a pretty good job of disrupting a very expensive, hard-to-counter flyer. Angels of Decay are pretty consistent for the most part, but this battle particularly, they have really not been able to find much success. Nurglings going down, more Nurglings going down, Pesty's going down. Warboss still alive. Jaden doing a very good job of keeping this guy alive and away from the threats to him. He's used all his abilities. Doesn't really need to do a whole lot. I mean, no Fermented Fungi, no Boss Loons. Tormentor's Sword and Spite of the Bad Moon are available, so just using him sparingly to run in and like snare stuff with the sword, and then pop something like Spite of the Bad Moon to give a damage boost to his like either cavalry or infantry where needed. Really nice, solid play. Nurgle finally flipping the top objective, but they are on death's door when it comes to the tickets right now. It was very, very solidly played by Broccoli Girl. Just staying out of these positions where you're like diving against a swarmy aggressive faction is a must. You need to keep your skirmish cav alive at all costs, basically. Even if it means giving up the middle point, fine. Better to lose the point than to lose these cavalry early. You've got a long time to work in Dom with just a single cap. Holding on to this high ground objective at all costs would have been much better than trying to like push here, lose this point, push a little here, also lose this point. If your opponent's just got numbers on you, sometimes you just got to cut your losses and just concentrate somewhere where you can win decisively and force your opponent into a big, huge engagement, which would probably swing a little bit better for Nurgle just because the area of contact for your army is more focused at that point. You've got higher impact single entities that can support, as well as just not getting overwhelmed on numbers. You know, it's a little bit harder to like attack just like a smaller army that's fully concentrated in one area than a small army that's, you know, split up in a couple of different places. So that's really the best thing you could do, and I think you would probably be in a winning position if you just stuck your army together a little bit more, and just use those horsemen to like poke out, threaten to cap objectives, and then like pulling away and frustrating your opponent more than anything. You know, because Boar Boys can only do damage to you in melee combat. And while the Wolf Raider cav are very good skirmish cav, Nurgle Horsemen do have a bronze shield, so they actually can mitigate a lot of missile fire that's coming in on them if they're chasing stuff. You don't want to chase too far into the back line, but just threatening charges on these guys isn't a bad idea because they're so squishy. They're even squishier than your Horseman cav. That's really a good strategy for screening, is just threatening more than actually committing to fights. Like, run in, your opponent either, like, tries to then countercharge you, at which point you can just run away and you're not going to get caught thanks to the poison. And you're going to drag your opponent into your own lines at that point, or they have to disengage, and they're probably eating a reasonable amount of damage from the throwing axes. at that point. And the range advantage isn't that great for the Wolf Rider archers, so you can rush in on these guys with Marauder Horsemen pretty easily, unlike in other matchups where the Horse Archers have like 140 or, you know, more range than you by a wide margin. These guys only have 100. Your throwing axes, I think, have 70 range. Maybe they got 80. I don't actually remember. But we'll check real quick. Yeah, 70 range. It's not great, but, you know, the range disadvantage isn't so overwhelming that you can't still get in range and just poke away. And, like I said, your guys have shields, you know, fairly durable. They got a lot more HP than the Wolf Rider Cav. So, just like trying to trade a little bit against them really isn't that bad of an idea if you're just going in the one-on-one at range. You will win that as long as you play it carefully and don't let your Marauder Cav get caught by the Boar Boys. Which you really shouldn't get caught ever, because these guys have 70 speed. Your Marauder Horseman Cav as Nurgle, they've got 90, which is damn fast with the fact that they lower speed on anything they're chasing. They should be able to just get away with murder at all times with their, you know, reasonably strong missile there. Another thing you can do, this is a matchup where the Noxbringer is very strong. You know, the Mortar is pretty good at, like, killing Skirmish Cav. You destroy ammo also with the effect from Cloud of Erosion, and it's also good against archers, like Orc Arrow Boys and stuff. And it's also just got Terror, and the Greenskins don't have a lot of ITP on their units. And especially against demonic factions where Savage Orcs who do have it because of Frenzy, you know, they lose out because there's a lot of magic damage that demon factions can bring to the table to get around the Fizz res they have. You've got a pretty good opportunity to just run in and frustrate the Greenskins by terror routing a lot of their units, which they really don't like. It is very punishing it's very punishing to get terror routed, as any faction pretty much. You know, ITP is really the only thing that saves you from terror routes. That's one of the reasons why Slaanesh is so strong. They've got ITP on literally every single unit, even their chaff. It mitigates a very, very hazardous situation from developing when you're fighting on points if your opponent has terror on the field. And it's pretty underrated in Dom. You know, terror routes are pretty impactful in Conquest, but I think it's just as important to have something in your army against some factions that has terror so that you can really follow up and put your opponent to flight. It's also a good target for healing, of course, with Fleshy Abundance and Fecundity and stuff. And since it's got pretty long range, it's hard to rampage it with Fermented Fungi. Because Fermented Fungi is a pretty short-range ability. You know, Skarsnik has it, so we'll just check it here. Yeah, 75 meters. There's no freaking way a Night Goblin Warboss is going to be able to close the gap onto the Noxbringer if you're positioning it well. To be able to rampage it into a position where they can do enough damage to, like, kill it quickly. And, you know, as good as Kha'Zix is, you can see he is very killable. There are ways to exploit single entity characters, and your opponent did a very good job of it. Using that rampage and lowering that melee defense and making him very squishy, and just hard committing to killing him. He's good if he's left to his own devices, but lots of people aren't going to just let him get away with murder. And they're going to, you know, make sure that they've got some kind of tools for the hero core that Nurgle can oftentimes bring and have a lot of success with. Alright, we've got, I believe, one more replay. Yeah, Bobby versus Levis here. Our Beastman champion. Going into the Lizards, this is a pretty even matchup, in my experience. Granted, most of the games I've played have been against a Shredder of Lustria, which is an incredibly strong build against the Beastman, because the Shredder of Lustria is just great at terror routing you and scaring the crap out of all your units. Against a more even Lizardman build, it is probably going to be pretty heavily advantaged for the Beastmen, since they're so good at swarming. And, you know, as much chaff as the Lizards are able to bring, the Lords and the big monsters tend to be very expensive, so they can end up going pretty tall without fully intending to. And they do have Mazdamundi here. Mazdamundi is almost like 3,000 gold on Zlock, even with very pared down items and abilities. And he actually has quite a few of his expensive abilities here. Banishment and Runation are both 200 gold. Apotheosis and Net, that's like another 400. And then Greater Arcane Conduit is another 200 gold. Add that onto the fact that Zlock as a mount is like 1250 in his own right, and then Mazdamundi at base is, what, 900 gold? He's up to 2,500 gold cost, just about. Really expensive. And again, he is really good against the Beastmen with the nets, but you really need a lot of tools to punish effectively if you're getting nets off. You need really concentrated missile fire or high DPS melee units that can just fly in and just shred whatever is locked down in the Net of Amantok radius. Pesty's getting poked by Chameleon Skinks. You know, very good target, despite the missile resist these guys have. 25% is nice, but their low armor does just leave them incredibly vulnerable to, like, concentrated skirmisher fire. And Chameleon Skinks are accurate and do a lot of damage very quickly because they shoot so fast. You can see they're pulling back, having lost about 2,000 HP, which is pretty brutal, honestly. 20% of your HP in just a handful of seconds. Not really ideal. Bushes of Kalkengard have the silver shields and regen, though, so shooting at them, not particularly effective. I wouldn't really be wasting my time as the Lizards right now trying to hit them. It's just going to take way too long to be able to wear these guys down with Chameleon Skinks. You're better off bringing the Umbral Tide in to deal with the Butchers of Kalkengard. Because the Umbral Tide ignore the shields, I'm pretty sure at least. And then, of course, these guys have a fire weakness because of the regen, so they get punished really badly by Salamander hunting packs. Amixon Barbs come out. Amixon Barbs are really good against armored infantry, but not so good against chaff. They're very short range, and the Beastmen being so fast, they can reasonably shut down Razordons without too much of an issue. Goreherd getting poked down by the Chameleons. Bobby is being very, very passive here. Especially leaving a lot of these unshielded units in the front line just to get poked. And the Doombull is a strong lord, but again, does not want to get hit by a lot of these shooting units. And overextending into the Amixon Barbs here, big mistake. Definitely cannot afford to play so risky like that. If you're at a range disadvantage as the Beastman, I mean, you don't have a lot of fast tools in. Honestly, you've got the triple cap right now. That's nice, but what you can do, just leave one of the points, leave the objective open, and try and bait your opponent into moving up on it, because you, as the Beastman, are almost always faster than your opponent. Lizard Skinks are pretty quick, but they're not as good in melee combat as Goreherd are. Goreherd just shred Chameleon Skinks and Red Crested Skinks, as well as Skink Cohort. Try and bait your opponent into moving up here, and then punishing them as they get up on the point. You can push some stuff past and surround. Try and cut off your opponent's units from reinforcing there. and get value that way. Or you can just, just full retreat and build up a little bit. And wait until you've got the right tools out to be able to engage. Doing stuff like this, where you just are sending like 1 or 2 units in on risky dives, always a bad idea. Especially against lizards with Mazda because of the nets. Really good net here. Very, very good follow-up also with some feral cold ones. Red-crested skinks. Mazda's also in here contributing some serious damage against these very expensive Centaur great weapons. And, these guys, you can't really afford to fumble away like this. They cost 1,000 gold. They're an investment. They're very powerful if used appropriately, but definitely not the best dive in the world right now. Spearmen pushing forward a little too late. If you had pushed these Pestigors and the Ungor Spears in at the same time, then the net wouldn't have been nearly as horrendous for you. Especially if you can get the Ungor Spear Herd in here on top of the Centaurs as they get netted. Combined arms is really important for the Beastmen, just because they're low armor and they can fall off really badly in the late game if they don't already have a value lead. Lizards just kind of flattening over your units right now. You got Ripper Dactyls just getting on top of your Ungor Raiders for free. This is why you have Centaurs. They are really good at protecting your Ungor Raiders. And Ungor Raiders are a really, really solid archer. They're 125 gold. And you might look at their missile profile and be like, they got 1 AP and like no damage. Why do people like these so much? One of the reasons is they've got Stalk. They can creep up in unexpected places and just pour fire in. They also may not have a lot of damage. They fire really quickly. And since they're so cheap, they can easily double their value. Even if they're just shooting at stuff like Chameleon Skinks and Razordons and stuff where they're not going to do like a tremendous amount of like raw damage. Just poking away at these units and leaving them a little bit more vulnerable for the high charge bonus that Beastmen have across the board. It gives you a better chance at winning engagements in one decisive go. They're very, very powerful. Deceptively powerful, for sure. Corndors are fighting Croxies, which is nice, but there are red-crested skinks in here buffering damage. And, the lizards are not just sticking in and grinding on top of these Corngors with their monstrous infantry. Very good micro from Levis, recognizing some rallying units, stopping them from getting a rear charge onto the Skinks and the Croxigors and, potentially having some leadership problems, and just using the Croxies just to absolutely smash those guys into oblivion. And now they can move around the flank and get onto this, the rear of this fight if they really wanted to. It's a little risky against Beastmen, just because, of course, they've got quick units that can come in and protect their flanks pretty well, but, Beastmen being down about 2,000 value is looking pretty grim for them, and they're bringing a lot of units out into the middle here, where they're kind of getting overwhelmed, just by weight of numbers. Croxies routing here, very bizarre. They got a lot of HP, or I mean a lot of leadership right now. There wasn't anything near them that I could tell here, but they should rally eventually. But if the Beastmen want to, they could send a Razorgore herd or something to try and chase these guys off the field. Because they could always get some healing from Mazdamundi with Apotheosis, which would be pretty nice for them. They got 9 models left. They could definitely receive the healing very efficiently still. Koroks Bandrippers are a really cool unit, and they're honestly really strong against the Beastmen, and in quite a few different matchups, but they're, very expensive. They're 1,300 gold. I think that they're better coming in the late game, where they can be just a absolutely impenetrable anchor. And, lizards love their skirmishers. And yeah, these guys have 95 armor, but just getting poked by these javelins all game is putting them in a really bad spot. Like I said, not a ton of AP on Chameleon Skinks, but just the weight of fire, and they have a ton of ammo. they can easily wear out some more elite options, like the Koroks Man Rippers, without too much issue. Butchers are, they still got all their models. They've gotten some pretty decent fighting done, but they just haven't been able to find any decisive engagements yet. This is looking like it would be a really good spot for them, but a beautiful net stopping them from getting their charge bonus off. And then they get swarmed by the Chameleon Stalkers and Rallying Chameleon Skinks here. They're going to take a reasonable amount of damage. Probably not going to be very catastrophic for them. I'd be surprised if they even lose a model here, but it's just preventing them from getting like a really clean, decisive engagement, and it did allow for the flip to come in for the Lizardmen. And Mazdamundi get a retreat now. Not like the most dangerous units in the world, but Butchers at Kalkengard could do a lot of damage to him, and Mazda's much better off using nets than having to heal himself all game. Because Lizards, definitely want to be able to control the mobility of the Beastmen as much as possible, and they've done a very good job of that. They've been crushing the Centaurs who have been diving into the backfield here. The Chameleon Skinks finally get caught by the Sons of Goros, and these guys have gotten some really solid value. Very good ROR unit for the Beastmen. Just like better stats than your standard Centaur. They've got Guardian. Of course, they've got Rowdy. But better armor as well. Really nice stuff. And magic attacks, of course. They're very powerful. Fighting on top of Mazda, though, here, not going to go too well for them. Their AP is nice, but they don't have amazing combat stats, and their charge bonus is what they're really reliant on. Centaurs, unlike Seekers, even though Centaurs have like the same like model size profile as Seekers, they're not nearly as good at just deleting SEs. They can do good damage to SEs with their charge bonus, but really Centaurs are just for clearing out like enemy infantry with rear charges or crushing mobility. They're a countercharge unit, is really the long and the short of it. Taking head-up fights with Centaurs is usually a pretty bad idea. That's why these dives have been going so poorly, is because even when they are getting back here, they're running in and like getting good charges, but then their like weak melee attack and melee defense is like letting them down as they try to like grind out some value. Really what you want to do, the Beastmen, I've said it in some of my Beastmen roster breakdown videos, they're the ultimate hammer and anvil faction in this game. They can use any and all of their units interchangeably as either the hammer or the anvil. Even Centaurs. Centaurs are a little bit riskier to do just because they're expensive. Really what you want to do is use your very quick infantry, who all have 42 or 40 movement speed, to like fix your opponent in place, and then you get the Centaurs and Razorgore herds to get side and rear charges, and you just like stop your opponent from being able to punish that by continuing to like throw like good value trading units into the path of anything that's trying to reinforce those fights. And you can just continue to like snowball and compound on value leads that you develop. Bobby has brought this game back. Doing like a fairly good job of being able to stay in this game, like keeping the Butchers alive. I mean, they've regenerated a lot of health. And they haven't lost any models. That's probably a good like 800 or 900 value that Levis has that's functionally useless just because of all the poke the Butchers have taken and been able to survive. But they're getting up in spears now, which is not a good place for them. Good micro, pulling them back immediately. Definitely don't want to leave them there. Pesties fighting the spears instead is nice. Doomball going down is really rough. If this Lord dies, Beastmen are going to lose a lot of leadership, and their leadership is solid on their chaff, but it doesn't get much higher than the 60s on a majority of their units. And what can happen is that you lose your Primal Fury, you lose your ITP, you lose the extra speed, charge bonus, and small melee attack buff, and your stuff is way less effective. And you can just get absolutely smacked around at that point. Doomballs are really strong.
You have killed an enemy lord.
But they are, you know, vulnerable to stuff like, you know, the Amexon barbs, who have been used very well. They can get caught in spears and poked down. Malagor would be really nice in this matchup, just because Malagor has such good magic options for the Lizardmen. You know, he can cast Flock of Doom on Spear Riders. Enfeebling Foe is consistently underrated, in my opinion, especially for the way that Beastmen operate as a faction, like their charge bonus being fairly high on all their units. But then also just the fact that they are really ferocious and have like perfect vigor. Enfeebling Foe is very good for giving you decisive engagements against fresh enemy units that you can then just absolutely slaughter with like fairly tattered units. It's really powerful. It can also allow Malagor to fly in and like debuff enemy lords and duel them for a little bit. Not really a good idea with Mazdamundi on Zlok, but he could be flying around and going after, say, you know, like some of the Chameleon Stalkers, fighting next to his Centaurs and debuffing the Spear Riders. He can actually hit them fairly effectively. He's got good melee attack and reasonable melee defense against something like a Coldwind Spear Rider. He's actually fairly safe because these guys have low melee attack and they're reliant on a bonus versus large for the damage that they can do. And he can pick off like 1 or 2 models with every swing, which really stacks up over time. He can get a lot of value for you. He's very good at controlling like battlefield mobility fights. And he has Icons of Vilification, which is a pretty underrated item. It imbues 12 extra leadership in a 35-meter radius around him. And it's active even if he's out of combat, so he can just hover over fights and give you a lot of extra leadership, which means that your Goreherd, who only have 62 leadership at base, suddenly become an incredibly difficult infantry unit to break in terms of leadership. Butchers of Kalkengard go down. They got their value back. They're fairly consistent as a unit. But you really do need them to uptrade, typically, for it to like really be worth bringing these guys. And them getting crushed off here in the late game, you know. This is kind of what you do against the Beastmen, man. Like, you just gotta survive their early ferocity, find ways to chip down their Centaurs, kill their lords, and frustrate their attempts at overwhelming your positions. And then you can always just push in and get a triple cap at the end, man. Beastmen are basically done here. Beastmen are very good when you take lots of wide engagements against them. And you just kind of stick and try to fight against, like, overwhelming mobility, because the Beastmen can always just, like, rally and overwhelm you whenever they damn well please, pretty much. And the Lizards have been just... They've been fighting very spread out fights, but something that they've been doing very consistently is they've been retreating back into a very protected shell, where they then can counterpunch against the mobility without overextending their infantry. And they did a really good job of protecting the Chameleon Skinks. That is why Levis is walking away with the win here. Like, they all got really good value. This is the worst performing one, and they're 5 damage value off of paying for themselves. And the other ones, these two got 1,800. This one almost 2x its value. Pretty amazing stuff. The Croxigors didn't do too well. Croxies against Beastmen, probably not a very good option. Like, Corngors are just really solid. You're going to run into them. Beastmen have plenty of AP to deal with monsters of infantry, like the Croxigors. Their stats aren't that good. They're better in other matchups, like against like Chaos Warriors and stuff. Against Goreherd and just like Ungor Spears, there's not a lot of value for these guys to find, in my opinion. The Sora Spears were great, always a solid option, bring in that Spear variant to hold against any big targets, as well as just be A unit that you can always pull your own stuff through and drag Centaurs to their doom is really nice. And one of them got 1200 value. The other was solid value. Had plenty of health left in the bank at the end there as well. That's usually the sign of well-microed spears. They either get a bunch of value, or they get some small amounts of value, but, they're reasonably healthy at the end. Which means that they've been buffering stuff out and frustrating their opponent's momentum, as well as just holding on to objectives, probably. Skink Skirmisher also got great value, just good value across the board. This is like the sign of a well-used and well-microed army. There's not a lot of inefficient trades here. Even the Croxagores, who are probably the least efficient tools here, at least got some kind of value. Even if it wasn't the most effective performance in the world, they soaked up a lot of attention and damage, and that differential was made up for elsewhere. The Ripperdactyls did great. 1600 there. The Amazon Barbs were the low-key goat here with 1900 value. I was really worried seeing them on the field. I didn't think they'd be able to do that much, but I gotta eat my words here. They did a great job of poking down the Doom Bowl. They shot the Koroks Man-Rippers a little bit. Presumably poked some Korngors and Centaurs and stuff, and they were alive from wire to wire, which is honestly very impressive, so gotta give it up for Levis. Beastmen are a very tricky faction. Not a lot of people play them, and the people that do play them, I don't know what it is. They tend to, favor, a very particular skill set from players. And the people who just, are drawn towards the Beastmen just seem to really click with the faction and understand them on a pretty intuitive level. And because they've been banned for so long, even after the Centaur nerfs, which have evened them out a bunch, I think people are just not all that familiar with how to play against them. I think over time, their win rate will drop a little bit. They're still a top-tier faction for sure, just because of their design, but they're definitely the least oppressive top tier in the game, in my opinion. And I think this battle is a really prime example. I honestly might just do a full standalone video where I just kind of break down, frame by frame almost, how Levis kind of dismantled the Beastman here. Because Bobby is a good Beastman player. I mean, having watched all of the games that Bobby played in this new player tournament, got into the semis with the Beastmen, and it's one of the first tournaments that Bobby has played in, from what they've been telling me. Levis also very new. This is a good example of just being new doesn't mean that you're not able to win and do well early on. Plenty of people can come in and they've got a faction that they just really understand and can play and execute at a fairly high level and be able to just have a lot of success with. But, learning over time and, getting your feet under you, taking lumps early, and then, really figuring out the game works just as well, Prior performance does not guarantee future results, and vice versa. It's all about, staying humble, and just learning from your mistakes. It's kind of what this whole coaching series is about, and, I hope that more than anything, people just, learned some new things about, very individualistic, or very individual units, some of the ins and outs of the flow of combat for different factions, and then for those of y'all who are actually playing in these games, I hope you're maybe getting a little bit of an idea on some areas where you can improve on decision making and micro, and I'd love to see y'all in these tournaments again. This was one of the this tournament had some of the closer games that I've seen in some of these new player tournaments, because in new player tournaments, and definitely in higher level tournaments, oftentimes the battles can, just be, like very much like a land battle or a conquest battle where there's early decisive engagements and it's very clear who's won after the first like 4 or 5 minutes. But there were a lot of wire-to-wire games here, and you know, this one kind of came down to it. But the Lizards were just able to make those few extra plays, and did a very good job of punishing the few overextensions that Bobby made here, and that's why Levis is able to take it. It's been rambling a lot about this one, but I just love the game, dude. And good matches like this just get me fired up, and it's been fun casting all of these matches. Not all of them were close, but they were all like well played, for what few mistakes people did make. They're really not that big of a deal. Like, they're just little things that need to be cleaned up, and then you can get in there and you can scrap with anybody, man. It's just getting in there and learning what doesn't work in matchups. There's 24 freaking factions. Not knowing everything about the game when you're first starting off is not an issue at all, because trust me, it took forever to really learn the ins and outs of this game. And there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't really click when you're starting off, because there's a very big disconnect between looking at something on paper and thinking, damn, this unit's got to be crazy, and then actually getting into game and being like, okay, whoa, why is this not working? Like, what do I need to be doing differently here? Is this unit just not good? Doesn't need buffs, whatnot? And I really want this like series in my like coaching videos to be very like learning oriented. And I hope that comes across. Just let me know what you think in the comments. If you have anything to add in, things that I could focus on a little bit more or do differently, I appreciate any and all feedback, because I want to be as good as I possibly can be, to like welcome in like newer people, because I love the multiplayer scene and I want it to like persevere and do well, because it's not the most popular thing in the world. A lot of people just don't like think about it. This is a single player, intentionally designed to be a single player game at the end of the day, and the multiplayer, as good as it is ultimately kind of like an add-on, more than it is like a designed around system, and it's really been like the community and like the way that we like look out for one another and just enjoy the game and try to teach each other, and just have fun, that is really brought it to the point that it's at where it's at its most thriving, in my opinion. There's tournaments going on all the time. There's like discords with proper like ladders and elo and everything that you can go and find, and I'll try and leak some of that in this video in the description, so that y'all can jump in and join us if you have an interest, or have played in a new player tournament and gotten a little bit of that bloodlust that develops pretty quickly when you get into the multiplayer in this game, truth be told. But yeah, alright, that's enough rambling. Thank you all for sticking around. Again, let me know what you think in the comments, if there's anything that I can like improve on or touch up on, any questions that y'all have about stuff that you saw in this video and want a little bit more info on. Again, I'm here to help. So, peace out, guys. Take care. I'll see y'all next time.